You have these or
You folks ready?
we use this? What is that?
I don't think so. Just do your mics. Go ahead and give it a test.
And
Okay.
hello.
Testing.
Are you two ready?
Yep, me?
Mr. Painter, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Good evening. Bonjour. Welcome. So if everybody can take a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. We are a few minutes late. We wanted to give as many people as possible the opportunity to get in here and hear this terrific debate that we're about to go into. So I want to welcome you all to the first, and as far as I know, the only scheduled U.S. Senate special election debate between Minnesota DFL candidates running for the 2-year open seat. The organizers of this event, Duluth for Clean Water, Twin Ports DSA, and Our Revolution felt very strongly that Minnesota deserved a debate in this race, that it was critically important, and particularly for the people of our region, as you all are well aware. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. My name is Mary Owen, and I will be your sole moderator. If anybody has a problem, they can come up and join me. Before we begin, I want to thank the University of Minnesota Duluth for, and especially I believe the Democratic students, for helping us secure this fantastic space for the event tonight. And also, of course, the co-sponsors of this event, whom I just mentioned to you. And I'd also like to give a special event. They didn't write this into my speech, but I want to make sure that they are acknowledged. Ms. Jo Haberman, Michael Mayo, Jocelyn Hyde, John Kroom, Sean Pelletier, and Rich Updegrove. Can we give them a thanks? I'm happy to know, watching from the sidelines, that they all worked extremely hard to get this to happen. And I agree with them so much, wholeheartedly, that this is an important event. I'd also like to thank our folks taking questions in the back. That would be Troy Hansen, and again, Jocelyn, thank you, Jocelyn. And also our timekeeper, Mr. Malachi Coons, up front. Okay? He'll get to show his brilliance here in a second to you all. So there are 6, as you all know, there are 6 DFL candidates in this U.S. Senate race, and 3 accepted our invitation to debate: Mr. Richard Painter, Mr. Nick Leonard, and Mr. Ali Chehem Ali. I apologize if I didn't get that right. I hope I did. It's a beautiful name. Unfortunately, Mr. Leonard backed out just in the last 2 hours. So Chris Seymore and Gregg Iverson communicated directly with the planning committee, saying that they could not participate in this event, so we had plenty of time. We were well informed. Ms. Tina Smith has not replied to the invitation to debate, but you'll see from the seat in the middle, we will welcome her at any moment if she wants to.
There's Tina.
Before introducing the candidates who are with us tonight, let me review the goals and rules of this event tonight. It is not quite your typical, if you went to college debate, we're not doing it that way. We're going to make it more Minnesota and more Duluth-like. So, and our candidates have been told of the rules. But just as a review, as moderator, I will pose the questions in 6 topic areas for 10 minutes each session. These topic areas were chosen by the planning committee and are as follows. Number 1, economic inequality. Number 2, corporate interference in our democracy. Number 3, environment. Number 4, diversity. Number 5, gender and LGBTQ, all in one. And number 6, foreign affairs. Again, you have opportunity to add your own questions to this mix by bringing those to the back. It is our goal to allow the last 30 minutes for questions submitted by audience members on question cards, as I just said, handed out at the start of the debate. And I'll make a judgment call about that based on how the dialogue is going. In other words, if we're having great debates for longer than 10 minutes, we'll let it go, okay? And then we'll move along. Someone will be letting me know back there, I hope, when the 10 minutes is up, and if we have time to enter another question during that 10 minutes. For most of the portions, the 10-minute sections, I have one question, but again, if we have a lot of time left, we'll go into another, okay? I'll direct the first question to, our audience questions will be sorted to avoid duplication of questions already represented in the 6 topic areas, and to prioritize questions of statewide or national significance. I will direct the first question to candidates in alphabetical order, and so we will start with Mr. Ali, according to their last names, and direct subsequent questions in rotation. Each candidate will get 1 minute and 40 seconds for an initial answer to each of the questions posed. Our timer, Mr. Coons, Malachi, will signal when a candidate has 1 minute via a green card, if you hold that up, 30 seconds with a yellow card, that up. And red when we will yank them from the stage. Or when they must stop speaking. Did you hear that, Mr. Painter? Didn't know if you were ignoring me there. After each candidate has answered a question, an open dialogue among candidates will complete the 10-minute session. Candidates may ask questions, challenge each other's statements, and make rebuttals. Each of these we've decided, just to keep things simple, will also be 1 minute and 40 seconds, okay? If they are going on and taking all of our time away, I will have the privilege of shutting them down. As moderator, I am not the judge of how a candidate may have performed in a round of our discussion. The audience here tonight, you and the audience watching by TV, who get the benefit of seeing the recording, will be the judge of the candidate's performance. The organizers of this debate are interested in the people of Minnesota, seeing how informed the candidates are, how they think, and how they may differ from each other. If they don't, then maybe they're both perfect, but we'll get to see. Now we'll begin with 2-minute opening statements from Mr. Ali Chehem Ali, followed by Mr. Painter, and thank you, gentlemen, for both being here. Go ahead, Mr. Ali.
Good evening, my fellow Democrat. My name is Ali Chehem Ali. I am married to Sabira Yusuf. I am a father of 6, 4 daughters and 2 sons. And I immigrated to this country 20 years ago. And I call home Minnesota for the last 18 years. And I ran for Minnesota Senate in 2016. This is the second time I'm running. Like former President JFK said, it's not what your country can do for you, but it's what you can do for your country. Growing up in a small, tiny village, a second-class citizen, been through civil war and oppression, here I am today, 1,000 miles away from my former home, aspire to be your next senator. It's only possible in this country. Why I am running? Because I care. I never been part of anything like happened tonight or any like United States. This is a dream, and I know I can make a difference because I care. I'm struggling like each one of you paying my bills. The matter of fact is, I have $1,300 waiting for me for medical bill, and I want to make sure you all have no worry about paying your medical bill and have medical coverage, not being a few weeks ago or month ago from the brink of bankruptcy. And I want to fight for a good job. Being a father of 4 daughters, and I don't want women to continue to consider a second-class citizen. I will fight not for $15 per hour, but for $17 per hour. And I will make sure to bring our military back home, get out of endless war, and stop wasting money. And I'm going to make sure to stop discrimination against women, mass incarceration, get rid of private prison, and legalize marijuana. And we do that with your help. I have no doubt in my mind we can move forward this country together. Thank you.
Mr. Painter.
I'm Richard Painter. My wife Karen Painter and I live in Mendota Heights, Minnesota. Karen and I are both professors at the University of Minnesota. Karen in music history and myself in the law school. We have 3 middle school age children. We love living in this beautiful state. We are very, very concerned about the future of our state and the future of our country and the world. And that's why I'm running. I think it's time to take action, not to just complain about Donald Trump on CNN or MSNBC or in the op-ed section of a newspaper that Donald Trump doesn't read. It's time to take action. Our House and Senate are not taking action with respect to what this president, vice president, and others in administration are doing. We must convene hearings to impeach and remove the president and the vice president. We must then move on to focus on the specific policy agenda that ought to interest not just Democrats, but Republicans and independents and all Americans. First, fix this broken healthcare system. Healthcare is way too expensive in the United States. It doesn't work. Just about every other industrialized country uses a single-payer system. We need a Medicare for all system. I will be discussing that this evening. we need to protect our environment, and that means first and foremost addressing the problem of climate change with a carbon tax or carbon fee, whatever you want to call it, but we need to move toward clean energy. And when I go to the United States Senate, I'm going to introduce a bill that bans sulfide mining anywhere near major waterways, everywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. So for both of you, our first topic this evening is economic inequality, and we'll start with you, Mr. Ali. Go ahead.
Question?
Yes.
How do you want us to handle applauding? Well, you want us not to applaud, or after each one of them speak? I missed that.
Applauding.
Yeah, the question is whether or not we should applaud. I'll take any input from the audience, but I'm guessing after each response and not during. Oh, Mr. Malachi has been to more of these than I have, and you say no applause.
They have done no applause in the past ones.
Okay.
They would recommend.
We will allow no applause. I know it's going to be hard. There are some issues that we all feel very strongly about, but we will allow no applause until the very end, okay? Everybody agree?
Yeah.
Democratic, yes? All right. Okay, Mr. Ali. In May of this year, the Federal Reserve, again, economic inequality. In May of this year, the Federal Reserve Bank released their annual report on the economic well-being of U.S. households. According to their study of households in 2017, 1/3 of adults in the U.S. are either unable to pay their monthly bills or only one modest financial setback away from financial hardship. That was about $400. Further, per a recent report on public radio, about 11 million families in the U.S. pay more than half of their income on rent, leaving minimal funds for necessities such as food and medicine. What, if any, federal remedies might be considered to lessen the economic burden on U.S. families, given these findings?
I think there is more one solution to keep up with. Investing in education. If we invest in education from the beginning, if we have a teacher with good salary, and our children will be better prepared for the future, and having 4 college degrees free. And at the meantime, if you have a universal healthcare system, who will protect them while they're growing up, we can resolve this problem. On the other hand, until we don't take big money out of politics, the corporation who control our elected official, we can go further. So this is a combination of all. If I am elected, I will fight to make sure we're going to invest money in education, we're going to invest money in healthcare, and make sure that we don't waste big money in the military that we could have used for different things. More importantly, minimum wage. Minimum wage is supposed to be raised at 17. A good paying wage is the only way we can resolve poverty. Otherwise, we're going to continue to go down the hill, and the poor will always be poor, and rich will continue to be rich. And the money, big money out of politics, that's the way to go.
Thank you. Mr. Painter.
First, we're going to repeal the 2017 tax giveaway to the very rich, which ran about $1 trillion to $2 trillion worth of additional federal debt. That is added to the problem of economic inequality. Second, put in place a single-payer health care system with a premium that is based on income. And we are going to have to raise the taxes for the well-to-do. And we're just going to have to do it. And we're going to say we're going to do it. And that's going to help pay for the health care system. We need to provide for food and housing for families that cannot afford to pay the cost, particularly of housing in many places getting exorbitantly expensive. And that is a responsibility of the government when people are not able to afford to help clothe and feed and house their families. Last, it's absolutely true that education, K through 12 and pre-K, we are not investing enough in this country, particularly in impoverished communities. The children do not have the opportunities that well-to-do children have, and poverty perpetuates itself, just as racism perpetuates itself. And if we are not willing to invest money in our children, we are not going to have a future as a democratic society. And I will insist on that And I will talk later about how we're going to cut down on the bloated defense budget and also make sure the states are no longer doing things like this Viking Stadium down in Minneapolis, where they blew about $1 billion worth of money that should have been invested in schools.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Mr. Ali, do you have any rebuttal or any concerns, questions about the statement from Mr. Painter? Anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Mr. Painter, anything further?
I think we all both have some very good ideas. I just wish Congress would do some of them.
Okay.
We're going to make them.
It looks like we have plenty of time left in this 10 minutes, so I'll move on to the second question. Mr. Painter, we'll start with you. As reported in the World Fact Book, available at the CIA.gov, and other sources, the United States now ranks in the 30th percentile when it comes to economic inequality. That is, 70% of countries around the world have more equal income distribution than we do. Is this an important issue to you, and if so, how will you address it?
It's a very important issue, and there are two factors, well, several factors driving this, but two main factors. One is a reduction in the percentage of the workforce that is unionized since the 1950s, and unionized jobs generally provide substantially better pay and benefits. And second, our tax structure. I hear a lot of people who are very conservative say, well, this life was so wonderful in the 1950s. I said, well, that's great. Let's go back to some of those good old-fashioned Eisenhower tax brackets for the well-to-do. And that's what we need to do, to have really a progressive tax system. We've lost that. And meanwhile, taxes are actually higher at the lower end because of the Social Security tax plus state taxes going up, and sales taxes and all sorts of fees and the rest of it. So we need a more progressive tax system, as well as having more people able to join unions, which means the law must accommodate organizing workers instead of these so-called right-to-work laws, which basically just prohibit you from having a union shop. We need, at the federal level, to facilitate organization of unions, particularly in fields, areas of work, such as services, where there are relatively few unions and pay is quite low.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Mr. Ali.
Yeah, to begin with myself, I have been a member of Union Local Fund 20 for the last 15 years. My wife, she's a member, my brother is a member, and so on. And I think if I'm elected, I will pass a federal law at the U.S. Congress that will allow every company in every corner of the United States bargaining unit has to be able to organize without fear in order to reject the policy of Wisconsin, right to work. It has to be universal, that everyone has the right to organize in the United States 15. On the other hand, we must start taxing the big corporation, Wall Street. That's the money go. And we have to do everything in our power to change the entire structure that we have the U.S. Congress now with the term limit, kick them out, and elect the new body who's really going to work and represent for people rather than representing a corporation. That's the way to go. And also continue to invest in education. That's the key. Education is the key in order to become successful, in order to move forward. Without education, we can go nowhere. The housing, another problem. Gentrification must be rejected. Now the poor people are pushing out of cities, and there is no way they're going to be able to get a decent job. That's what I will do if I'm elected.
Thank you both. I think we have time within this 10 minutes. We have 3 minutes left. I do want to ask one question of you both. You both mentioned the importance of unions, but we had a recent Supreme Court decision that took some of that power away by allowing people to elect not to be part of the union. So how would you address that, Mr. Painter?
Well, first, we can pass additional statutes in Congress that will facilitate organizing of unions. You can't have workers opting out of the union. That's not going to work because then the employer is just going to bring in non-union labor. Congress is going to need to enact additional statutes. The Supreme Court is not willing to enforce what we've got. Second, the Supreme Court has an interpretation of the Constitution, the First Amendment, that is ridiculous in this context with respect to some of the labor cases they've decided, as well as campaign finance. This Supreme Court needs to get the message they're going to cut it out. We're not going to confirm another justice to their court until we're done with the impeachment hearings. So Brett Kavanaugh is going to wait. And then we're going to have very honest answers from future nominees to the court as to whether they're going to interpret either federal statutes or the First Amendment in a way that gives the corporations all sorts of rights that individual workers do not have. And I want to emphasize again that the number 9 is not in the Constitution. Franklin Roosevelt observed that. And if there is a House and Senate and President of the same party who want to raise the number of justices, that can be done if they continue to behave this way. President Roosevelt sent that message back in 1937, and they got their act together pretty quickly. But I've just about had it with this court, particularly with Citizens United and some of these cases in the labor area and some other areas.
Thank you, Mr. Ali.
Sadly, the role of government normally is to provide, to improve the life of the people they represent. In this country, it's not the case. It's to improve the life of the pocket of the wealthiest 1%. How we can end that in order to protect the union? What's happened recently from the Supreme Court is a crack. It's trying to dismantle the union. In order to improve or to protect those rights, we have to vote. We all have to get out to vote and elect people who will represent and protect the union's right. But if I'm elected, I will not vote for a judge who will go against the bargaining right. I will make sure the bargaining right is protected. But it's up to us. It doesn't help us to complain about Supreme Court, to complain about Donald Trump. He's the president. He already appoints. He's about to ask a Democrat to get out to vote and to take back the House and take back the Senate. It's up to us, and we have to work hard in order to protect the union and other workers. And it's up to us. And I know with your support, if you give me the privilege to serve you as a future senator, I will do everything in my power to restore and protect the right of the bargaining, of the union. Thank you.
Thank you both. We'll move on to our second topic, which again is corporate interference in our democracy. And I believe, Mr. Ali, you are first on this one, because Mr. Painter went first on the second question of the last. Big money in politics. This is a two-part question. Enormous sums of money are being given to political campaigns by wealthy donors, often anonymously, without voters knowing who is trying to influence them. Do you believe this is a problem, and if so, what would you do about it?
It's not a problem only, it's a crime. It's a crime against all of us. We're not electing official. What we elect is corporate official with the dark money is Citizens United. Citizens United, the Supreme Court take out the right of our citizen. We are not in democracy. We are run by a corporation. Corporations dictate. They write the bill. They elect who's going to be president, who's going to be senator, who's going to be in the House of Representatives, and so on. What we need to do is to reclaim democracy and to make sure we end Citizens United. That has to do with Democrat and Republicans alike. It's not, we have tendency to blame Republican. And a large number of Democrats, they're in the pocket of corporation. Therefore, corporation or the invisible hand dictate the policy in this country. We don't even know about them. But it's about time to separate, to reclaim democracy, and to have a right as a citizen. And our democracy, people have died for it. Thousands of Americans died and give their life for what you have today, and we have to continue to fight for it. If you elected me, if you give me the privilege to go to Washington, D.C., I will make sure to end Citizens United and to reclaim democracy and protect your right, my right, and the right for American citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Mr. Painter.
The Supreme Court has been doing this for too long. It went back to the early 80s with a case called Buckley versus Vallejo, where they said that Congress could not prohibit excessive campaign spending, could not regulate campaign spending. That is why Senator Smith has already spent, as of July 1, 28 times what my campaign spent. And has enough left over to fly in for this debate on a Learjet if she wanted to. That is why in the fall you will see much, much more money spent on super PAC ads run by organizations, 501c4 organizations with the First Amendment rights bestowed upon them by the United States Supreme Court. They could be funded by Vladimir Putin for all we know. This is a disaster for our democracy. We're going to have to stand up to this Supreme Court and send them the message they're going to butt out on campaign finance, or we're going to be increasing the number of justices. We are going to take this seriously. I also support the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution that would repeal Citizens United in all of these cases where the Supreme Court has interfered with campaign finance laws. We also need to have a $200 per person tax credit, to give to the party or the candidate of your choice. And some people say that would cost too much money. I say no, because it would empower the people instead of the K Street lobbyists who are continually lobbying for more and more big pork barrel spending projects over at the Department of Defense, transportation, everywhere else. We'll save money if we bring our democracy back.
Okay.
I will add another thing is, I think if we end the term limit of the Congress, that can change a lot. At the meantime, the people will be elected, and most of the time they are completely disconnected. It's about time to elect a normal people, worker like you, blue collar, people who feel your pain, who struggle with their bill, who worry about paying their medical bill, who worry about paying their mortgages, who worry about paying their taxes, worry about paying their rent. That's what we need to do. Let's come down and elect one of us. Someone who's normal, not aspire to be president, not aspire to be CEO, not aspire to go work for a big corporation. That's what we need to do. That's what I'm planning to do if I'm elected.
We do need term limits. We will have to amend the United States Constitution to have term limits. But in the meanwhile, we can cut back on the seniority system in the House and the Senate, which gives a lot of these people more power than they ought to have. I think of Chuck Grassley from Iowa. And others. We need also to make sure that members of Congress are not allowed to lobby back to the House and Senate after they leave. We need a lifetime ban on lobbying back. Finally, we need to have a ban on financial conflicts of interest for the members of the United States House, the Senate, the President, the Vice President. Sick and tired of Donald Trump telling us, well, the President has no conflicts of interest. Well, he does. It's just that the criminal conflict of interest statute does not apply to him. It will when I get there, because I'm going to co-sign with legislation I believe that Senator Warren has already introduced that would do just that. Also apply to the members of the House and Senate. And I have repeatedly asked Senator Tina Smith to sell her pharmaceutical stock and medical device stock. This is the type of conflict of interest we cannot have. There are a few senators that have this problem, and about a dozen members of the United States House of Representatives, including a Republican congressman from New York who's been buying and selling pharmaceutical stock while sitting on the health committee. We're going to put a stop to this nonsense. I've had it. The American people have had it. We're sick of financial conflicts of interest and tired of the money in politics. And by the way, that's why my campaign will take no money from PACs, no political action committees, and we ought to be banning them.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. You just asked you answered the second portion of this question, and I believe you have as well, Mr. Ali. But just to be clear, are you accepting any monies from or donations from large corporations or PACs?
Not at all. I won't take any penny from any fossil fuel, for any corporation, for any interest group. I want to stay who I am with my poor folks. If you want to contribute, you are more than welcome. But I will not take. I will guarantee you, nobody gonna buy me. I am not for sale. I have a dignity. I suffer too much. For me, being here tonight, 1,000 miles away, growing as a second-class citizen, is a blessing. Regardless of the outcome of this event, regardless of the outcome of this election, I made it. This is the American dream. Let's work together for America, for Minnesota, for Duluth, and beyond. That's what I gotta do. This country has so much, giving me so much. We should not let down our country. I never been part of something big. It's the first time. And I don't want to see America go down. I want American hegemony to go for decades to come, centuries to come. And I will fight for it at home and abroad. Not only you be proud of your vote, happy with your vote, I will make you proud for decades to come. You and I, we can make history together. Little man from Africa, 5.6 inch. He can make from refugee camp to U.S. Congress is a win-win. I will be an asset for Minnesota, an asset for national interest. And for that, it's up to you to give me the privilege and opportunity to be the first African immigrant who go to Minnesota and Central Court. Few senators in history made the differences. I will be one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Mr. Painter, would you like to respond?
I also will take no money from PACs. It's right there on my webpage. No PACs, no super PACs, no Russian agents. I'm tired of this, what's happened to our country. A PAC is an attempted bribe. It is an offer of a bribe. That is why PACs are organized. The PAC wants the member of Congress to do something, and so they bundle together contributions under the name of the PAC so the member of Congress can understand who supports the member of Congress and who wants something in return. It is an offer of a bribe. I will not accept it. We must ban PACs. We must ban super PACs. And yes, that requires reversing Citizens United, or I'd have a case, actually I'm a lawyer on right now in the District of Columbia trying to persuade the DC Circuit not to apply Citizens United to super PACs. Actually, the Supreme Court never did give a First Amendment right to super PACs. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals came up with that crazy idea. We're trying to reverse that. But we're going to do everything we can in the courts, but we're going to have to change the composition of the courts and get a constitutional amendment through because no member of Congress, nobody running for office should have to decide whether to take PAC money when the opponent is taking reams of PAC money. And then the super PACs come in the general election with those filthy ads. It is abysmal. And one thing we're doing tonight to fight for campaign finance reform is having a debate. This is the old-fashioned way, and this is the way we're going to do it.
Thank you both. Thank you both for respecting the time as well. Doing a great job. We're going to move on to environment now. And how many minutes do we have left from that, Joe? 1 minute. Perfect. We're great on time. So on environment, we're going to start with you, Mr. Painter. Again, I believe you've already addressed this to some extent, but I'm going to ask you again. Considering the whole picture, do you think Glencore Polymet should be approved in Minnesota? And how do you see the balance of potential costs and benefits?
We should not have a sulfide mine opened near any waterway in the United States. And I am going to propose legislation that bans it. So we won't have these deals being worked behind the scenes where we do land swaps because they want to mine on federal land but not comply with a law on federal land. So they buy some other land and then buy some politicians and then you got a land swap. Well, fine, they've got their land. They can build an amusement park on it. They can build a Trump hotel for all I care, but it's not going to be a sulfide mine. This is dangerous. You loosen up all that hard rock. They take out what they want from it, which is probably going to go to the Russians or the Iranians, who are their big customers over at Glencore, and they leave us with a 99%, all broken up, ready to go into the water at any time. And it gets into the water, it's a mess. You ever see a picture of water with a sulfide mine near it? Well, it looks like his hair, and I think you know who I'm talking about. It's not happening in my country.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Mr. Ali.
Environment is one of the big issues that I really care about it. I come from Africa. You all know what's happened with the environment because of their corporation worldwide polluting the air. We don't need to be rocket scientists today to recognize what is right and wrong when we come to environment. Having said that, anything, any procedure in this country will affect the environment, the water, groundwater, river, I will not support. We cannot trust corporation. Corporation doesn't care about us. They care about money. Bottom line, there is $1 trillion in the ground. That's what they want. They don't see you. They don't see me. They don't see the future children who will be contaminated. We already have enough contamination in Minnesota, even around here, where 1 in 10 children have mercury on their bloodstream. That must stop. and sea level is rising around the world. There will be mass movement of people very soon. We already know it in a lot of countries. We have one of the beautiful landscape in Minnesota. We have to protect it. Northern Light Rail will be an alternative if you want to invest around here. That can bring jobs, mobility for people, and attract other company. We have the know-how, expertise to create job. An elected official job role is to create job and to bring job to this region and beyond. And I will not support any mining if it's not safe, especially the one we're talking about. I will not go with it.
Just to clarify, you're a bit of a stickler up here on this one. Do you not support
Sulfur mining around the water, I will not support it.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next portion of this question, we'll start with you, Mr. Ali. Indigenous communities have been fighting to protect their lands, culture, and way of life from industrial contamination for decades. How would you ensure that they and other affected communities are adequately consulted in the decision-making process that impacts them?
This is very personal to me when you talk about Native American. I experienced the same problem where I come from. I'm a native for Horn of Africa, one of the most strategic piece of land of everyone you want to take away from us. We did a lot of damage to Native American through history. Nothing has been fixed so far. They're living in reservation, very poor condition. And it's not acceptable in 21st century. We keep abusing them in many ways. They don't even decide which tribe they're going to belong to. Federal government dictate who they belong to. If you're not able to honor the treaty by law, is part of your constitution, let's give the land back to Native American. They know what to do better than many corporations. And if I'm elected, I will support it. They suffered so much. If they don't go along with this project, they have right to veto. And we should, out of discussion. This land belongs to them. We took away from them, we should give back to them. That will be the solution, obviously.
Thank you. I'd like to clarify what I'm asking here on this one, and I will give you a chance to respond after Mr. Ali, is what we're looking at is how would you make sure that Native communities, as well as any other community that's affected by proposal, industrial or corporate proposal, how do you make sure that their voices are heard?
Well, they do not. The voice can be heard only by elected official. Apparently, that can be decided in Congress. And so far, most of the people in the side of corporation. I think we need to be organized, give them a voice, and bring in consideration their concern of the inhabitant of this region. That's the people supposed to decide what is right, what is wrong for them. And elected official, I will help them to get there and to protect them from corporation.
Mr. Painter.
Native American tribes need to have sovereignty over their own land, first and foremost. And that includes sovereignty with respect to law enforcement, also sovereignty with respect to spending money that is theirs, not having decisions made by the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington. And when projects are proposed, whether they're mining projects or pipelines and other projects, the Native American tribes need to be heard. They need to have representatives in Washington. We should, where possible, elect members of tribes to the United States House of Representatives and Senate. But in any event, we should have members of the tribes in Washington giving testimony, letting us know about the impact on the tribes of pipelines, of mines. For example, what's the threat to the wild rice from mining? Because the mining companies bought the politicians down in St. Paul and rammed something through the state legislature, which fortunately the governor vetoed. But then they're going to try again, and again, and again. The Native American tribes are not heard. And they will only be heard if they have voices in Washington and in the state capitol. And voices where we expect testimony from the tribes about what is the impact of this project on your tribe. Even if it is a project away from the land, if it causes spillage into the water of pollution, that water, the tribe may very well be dependent upon for their livelihood. And last point, protection of wildlife. including the gray wolf. We need to stand up for our Native Americans.
Thank you. So what I think that I hear you both saying is that you would push to get not just Native Americans, but any group of folks who are affected by these decisions on their land up in front of Congress and in front and where they could help make policy changes. So.
I think that's Democrats, we are good at that. Protecting the poor. That's what we've been doing for so many years. We have to go back to do the same thing. To protect the people affected because they have no defense. The only way we can do that is to organize and to vote for the right people. Locally and federally. All treaty must be honored. That's part of the 1854 treaty with Chipaway is part of the U.S. Constitution. It's a law. It's the law of the land. Should not be violated. However, we can all come together as a Minnesotan, send the right people, protect the environment. It depends how we are organized again. Our voice can only be heard if we vote. If we don't vote, we can complain. There is more Democrat in Minnesota than Republican. And we can do it. This election is crucial. Regardless who will be the winner at the end, there will be one winner. In every level, I'm encouraging you to go to vote. It's a crucial moment. Our future, it depends our election, our action. We must keep governorship. We must take the state house back. Both in federal level, House and Congress. That's the way we can do it. But if it's corrupted elected official, where I come from, the lobbyist, the big money, it's just a corruption. There is no other name for it. Here, we have a nice name, we make it legal. What's supposed to be criminal, we legalize. Because it's a good fancy name, because people in power can decide for us. It's up to you, it's up to me, let's go get it.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Anything else?
We must make protection of our environment a #1 priority at the federal and state level. We must enact new laws, for example, the law banning sulfide mining near major waterways, and then fund the EPA and empower the EPA to enforce those laws and make sure that we never have someone like Scott Pruitt or Andrew Wheeler, who's currently at the EPA, at the helm. We need to enforce our environmental laws, not only for the landowners, but for the children, the future, for our human civilization. It is a top priority. And we should elect people to Congress, to the United States House and Senate, and presidents who will respect the environment and who will address these issues. And many Democrats will, but some will not. Some take contributions from PolyMed executives. Some take contributions from other companies that pollute the environment and PACs that pollute the environment. We cannot tolerate that. And part of my dispute right now with the chairman of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party is I've made it clear that I will not support any candidate for the United States Congress from the 8th Congressional District who supports sulfide mining. And there is an independent candidate in that race, and I'm making that very, very clear. We are not going to have sulfide mining in this state or anywhere in the United States near major waterways, and I'm drawing the line in the sand on that. And I don't care if someone has a D next to their name, an R or an I. No sulfide mining near our waterways.
Thank you both. We're going to move on to our next topic, and I'm going to switch them around a little bit, just for some diversity. Foreign affairs. And I believe we're to you, Mr. Painter, first. So on Israel and Palestine, the United States signed a $38 billion military aid with Israel in 2016. The United Nations routinely condemns Israel's use of excessive force against the Palestinians, its promotion of settlements in the occupied territories, and its control of what has been referred to as an open-air prison, the Gaza Strip. Do you think the United States should continue to fund Israel's military?
I would like to see the United States move away from funding the military in other countries all around the world. I really don't think that's the solution, the way we bring world peace, whether it's Israel or any other country, or arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the rest of it. We've got to get away from that. War and defense spending and more defense spending is not the road to peace. And to be selling military equipment to Saudi Arabia and then turn around and giving military aid to Israel, I mean, we're fueling an arms race in the Middle East. That is not the solution. We need to put pressure on both sides in the Middle East with Israel and the Palestinians and the surrounding countries to reach a peaceful resolution, to close down the West Bank settlements, to have countries around Israel recognize Israel so Israel feels secure, to address the situation in Gaza. The United States, at this point, has a very bad reputation in the Middle East because of our interventions, and also we're perceived as being one-sided. So we need to pull back, work through the United Nations, and address these problems, and not characterize one side as being the evil side and the other side as the good. That is not going to help, but what we need to do is get rid of the military aid, get rid of all the sales of weapons to the other countries surrounding Israel, and focus on peaceful resolution and say, this is just time, this has to be worked out. It's been too long, too much violence in that part of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Mr. Ali.
I think it's this failed foreign policy. We simply failed. When you come to Middle East, there's been ongoing conflict for more than 70 years. Of course, Israel is our close ally. Saudi Arabia is another ally, and continue. We must not give or support any military beside our own if we want to be fair and make peace. For the last 20 years, it's ongoing war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria. We're selling billions of dollars weapons to Saudi Arabia to kill children in Yemen, thousands of children. That's not the way to go. We need to restore dignity. Our foreign policy is not working. We have been more problem than solution. We must not fear democracy. The United States fear democracy. We must let people choose who they want. They need to choose their president. Democracy is the only way to go in order to bring peace. Assad, for instance, was advocating Assad. We killed Gaddafi. Look at the disaster. Thousands of African immigrants die in the ocean every day. This is our moral responsibility. If I'm elected, I will make sure we're not intervening in any war. We're not spending billions of dollars left and right to finance war, just proxy war. We must take care of our own before taking care of others. American matters. American people matter. Minnesota matter.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. I'm going to be a little bit more specific now and focus on, again, specifics. Military spending and U.S. imperialism. Mr. Painter, the United States maintains, I'm sorry, I'm going to start with Mr. Ali. The United States maintains close to 800 military bases around the world, large and small. It also spends vastly more on military budget than any other country. What would you do, if anything, to reduce our military spending?
To begin with, our military budget is so huge. It is true. We have a basis around the world. There is flip side in that. Being a big brother, being a superpower, it's expensive. Some benefit we might don't see because we don't know everything about it. Having said that, the majority of the money we spend on defense go to military and industrial complex. Not to the military themselves, not to their family, what we call corporate welfare. We are a socialist country because we give money left and right to corporation. That's what we need to cut. If you want to buy a jet, you don't have to pay $1 billion. You can tell them it's $500 million, maybe $200 million. Why? Those corporations run our policy. Those corporations elect people in the Congress who write those checks, who pass those laws. Big money. The only way to cut is to elect the right people again. We're going back to the same thing. And I love our military. If we love them, we should bring them home. Arms way. We should invest this money in healthcare, in education, in housing, and so on. This money doesn't go to the military. That's supposed to be reduced, the waste and the spending we do left and right. If you give me the privilege, if you give me the chance, that can be changed, and that will change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Painter.
There are two main reasons why our military budget is so extraordinarily high. First is the practice of getting involved in other countries around the world, which goes back to the McKinley administration when they were trying to tell people in the Philippines how to run their government after the Philippines was liberated from Spain. And that led to the anti-imperialist movement. People should have listened to the anti-imperialists because we have had subsequent interventions throughout the 20th century that have been disastrous. Vietnam during the Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon administration, 50,000 Americans killed and millions of Vietnamese. And then Iraq, Afghanistan in the Bush years, and we still are stuck in Afghanistan now years later. We've got to realize we cannot tell the rest of the world how to run their country. We can't export our idea of democracy. We've got to get out of Afghanistan. Alexander the Great couldn't hold down Afghanistan. The British Empire couldn't. The Russians tried and they failed. And we are going to go down if we stay there. It's a disaster. We need to stop trying to export our system of government and bring these troops home and close a lot of those bases. Second, the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower talked about in his 1961 speech. Now we've got, it's on steroids because of our campaign finance system. We've got all these defense contractors who plow a lot of money into elections and then they get multi-billion-dollar contracts. Well, we're going to put a stop to that too and get our defense budget down.
Thank you very much. It looks like we have 2 minutes left on this subject, but I believe that we've covered it pretty well. Okay, let's move on to the next then. The next subject was going to be gender LGBTQ, and I believe it's Mr. I'm getting lost again. Painter. Mr. Painter, thank you, audience. Healthcare access. Women's access to full healthcare services, including contraception and abortion choices in consultation with healthcare professionals, and LGBTQ plus women's healthcare and access rates are under fire by the current administration in Washington. What can federal and state policymakers do together to combat this trend?
Well, we got to elect different people because we got a bunch of people in Washington who think that their own particular religious views, or usually it's their constituents or whoever's giving them money, ought to dictate what everybody else does. And that is really the heart of this abortion debate, and it's spilling over to other areas of healthcare as well, birth control, many areas. It's just wrong for people, for government to be telling people what to do when you're making a personal decision and a medical decision as between the patient and their doctor. And we shouldn't have government doing this. And it's attempts to overturn Roe v. Wade. We know that's going on. And also the various regulations being promulgated now by the Trump administration. They're scaling back access, the attacks on Planned Parenthood. There are many communities where the Planned Parenthood clinic is the only place where you can get reproductive health care and other services, and they're trying to shut that down. You're just going to have to send new people to Washington because these losers are going to continue to do this until we get them out of there.
Mr. Elliott.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, women's access to full health care services, including contraception and abortion choices in consultation with healthcare professionals, and LGBTQ plus women's health care and access rights are under fire by the current administration in Washington. So how can feds, or the federal government, and state governments work together to combat this trend?
To begin with, I want to apologize for mankind, male, what have we been doing, what we have done to our sister, to our daughter, for a century. I'm sorry. I am a husband. I'm a son. More importantly, I'm a father of 4 beautiful daughters. For me, is a right. Women's rights should not be discussed in 21st century. You are the majority in this country. You should call the shot. You should take ownership. If I'm elected, women will have full right. Women will be in charge of the body. I will do everything in my power that government not interfere with your right. This is your constitutional right. You're not a second-class citizen. You are first citizen. Without you, there is no world. Without you, there is no strong man. My two daughters, Ali Chehem and Medina Chehem, are here to support me while my two sons are playing. Women is important in our life. I will fight for you because I was carried by a woman for 9 months. And I do respect my mother. I respect my wife, Seymore Yusuf, and my 4 daughters. LGBTQ should not be discriminated. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter their belief. They have the right to choose to be who they want to be and what they want to do with their body. And I will fully support if you elected me. Give me the privilege to serve you.
Well, I think I speak for all the women in this room. We very much appreciate your support, both of you. However, we also would like some specifics on how you might envision a federal or state relationship or partnership to help us fight these same issues that we just discussed. Access to care, primarily access to care. How would you work on that?
We need a single-payer healthcare system that will cover all of these services. There's an act in a federal statute. And then we got to make sure that people aren't elected who are going to try and undo that because they may have a particular religious objection or other objection to healthcare services being obtained by somebody else. So this is something we address our healthcare system with a single-payer system, with a sliding scale of premium based on income. We need to make sure that the services that people need, women and men, these are important services. That why should a government decide whether you get an abortion or decisions made at the end of life? There are many decisions. There are personal decisions you make with your doctor. And this is an area we are going backwards in. I mean, Roe versus Wade was a 7-2 decision by an all-male court with a lot of Republicans signing on to that opinion. And the idea that that's controversial 45 years later in this country and people still trying to undermine that is shocking. So what am I going to do? I'm going to make sure we don't have a Supreme Court that's going to take us backwards and reverse Roe versus Wade, because then the states are going to be working against you. And then second, we're going to have a single-payer healthcare system where services are provided. If you want them, you get them. If you don't, you don't. But you don't tell somebody else what to do, and you don't use government to tell somebody else what to do, because we all paid for this government.
Republican insurgency in Washington, D.C. They use the Constitution the way they want. When you come to Citizens United, big money, they have a choice. They have a constitutional right. Women too have a constitutional right. The way to go? Single payer. We should not worry about anything related to the medication. The choice is yours. I will make sure to pass a law to fight for universal health care. All 50 states. We must end once for all the debate about reproduction right for women. Government should not be in the business of making decision for you. That's your decision. That's your body. When you come to religion, that's personal. You can believe whatever you want. You keep for yourself. That's have nothing to do with others. We should not impose our belief, way of life, on others. This is a free country. And we should apply it in every level and anything in this country. Not cherry picking, try to undermine the right of our daughters, our mothers, our wives. And you give me the privilege to go to Washington, D.C., no doubt in my mind, I'm gonna fight it. This is an important election again. Everything have to go back to election. We have to elect the right people. We may go back to 1950. We're not that far now. It's a scary moment. Let's go to fight.
Okay, we do have a couple of minutes left, and rather than to move on to the next subject, there is a question on here that's one of the questions a little bit more pointed to you, Mr. Painter. And what do you mean, in the past you have proposed a buy-in plan for Medicare for All. Is this different from Senate Bill 1804, the Medicare for All, which was brought by Senator Bernie Sanders?
I would sign on to the Sanders bill, and there are other ideas that I've talked about. But I think Bernie Sanders spent a lot of time on that. There are a number of senators who signed on. I believe Senator Franken was prepared to sign on. And what we cannot do with healthcare is have too many different ideas we're arguing about. Because once you put together a majority of the House and Senate who will support single payer with a president who will, you have a matter of months to get it done. Because those insurance companies and medical device companies and the drug companies will get their PACs going. And pretty soon you'll have those ads like what they were running back in 1993 about how Hillary Clinton was going to take your doctor away in the middle of the night. They had the couple in bed worrying about Hillary. And they'll do that very, very quickly. So this is not an academic discussion. It's not a time for a faculty meeting. I think Bernie Sanders' bill, since it has a lot of support, I'd rather go there and just say I'm going to sign on to it. I'll throw in some ideas if I think I have some good creative ideas. And maybe they take hold, but and I'm going to want to see a way to pay for it. So we're going to raise some taxes. Don't vote for me if you are rich and you don't want to pay a little bit more in taxes, maybe quite a bit more. But bottom line is, because I insist that things be paid for, not just going to borrow the money. But I'm going to go with the Sanders bill unless something else gets not only looks better, but it gets traction with enough members. We can get it through fast. You spend more than 6 months on that, fiddling around, insurance companies will draft the bill for you.
Mr. Ali, any specifics?
Well, I always has been for single payer. You know, when I ran in 2016, if we have the capacity, if we're able to send man on the moon, we can fix healthcare problem. The only thing again go back to this run by corporation. Why the same medication cost $600, $700 here, cross the border, less than $100. Same manufacturing. I'm a diabetic. My diabetic medication costs so much here, cross the border, half of it, not even half of it. So unless we don't take this corporation out of making laws, we'll not go nowhere. In order to take them out, again, is to elect the right people. We can negotiate we can dictate, because if you have single payer, we're the one who's going to hire those hospitals or corporation. We don't going to negotiate, but we're going to dictate them how much we're going to pay. We got the power because we're going to buy it. The single payer is the only way to go in order to confront those corporations. And again, take the money out of DC. Elect the right people. Make sure you vote. That's the way to go. We don't vote, you have no voice. We need to take back the House. We need to keep governorship, Minnesota House, Congress. That's the way to go. If we do that, again, if you give me the privilege to represent you in Washington, D.C., I will do exactly what I said. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. We're going to move on next to diversity. So the first question is in regards to police violence. In the United States, and I believe it's Mr. Ali first on this one. In the United States, there is rampant violence against people of color and Native Americans by the police. According to a recent study in the Journal of Public Health, black men are 3 times more likely than white men to be shot by police in similar circumstances. And in some rural and suburban Midwest areas, right here, it increases to 8 times more likely. Native Americans experience violence by authorities at the same, if not higher levels than African Americans. What can the federal government do to address this national issue of violence against people of color and Native Americans?
Well, to begin with, the police, as my union brothers, I am union member, I fight for them. Having said that, being a black person in the United States is danger for me too. I never worry about being stopped by police, being shot. But in order to do that, we need to invest in our police department. We need to educate people. That starts with a mother. As a mother, as a father, we have to teach our children there is no difference between us. We all humankind. Diversity matter. That's what makes us stronger. But having said that, the elected official, the law in the book, doesn't protect the citizen. We need to change those laws. If a police officer kills someone and he was wrong, he should face consequences. He should go to prison. The judges will have it. So what is behind all those things? Private prison is another thing. Again, we're going back to big money. But we need to invest, train our police officer, and we need to hire minority as a police officer in order to have a different outcome. That is possible, but it's the community to fix the problem, not only one person. And I know together we can do that. This country overcome so many challenges. We need a political will. We should not militarize police force. They conduct themselves as a military, like they're going to go attack enemy. No, it's in the U.S. street. We must take those weapons and those things away from the police, and we make sure to have a law to protect a citizen right, not be killed, but to be protected. We should not fear the police. We should respect the police.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Mr. Painter.
First, it would help if we were to reduce the number of arrests for minor crimes. The so-called broken windows policy that was implemented by Rudy Giuliani when he was the mayor of New York, and he claimed that reduced the crime rate. It did not. It just increased tensions with the African-American community. We don't need to have police officers stopping people for minor things, and that's going to help. Also, marijuana laws. We don't need to prohibit marijuana. That's a way to intimidate minorities, mostly. Other people get away with smoking whatever they want, where they want. And if we legalize marijuana, if we move most of the drug offenses focus on rehabilitation rather than incarceration, we can get a lot of people out of our prisons. And I think that by focusing on the major crimes that really are a threat to our communities, we can reduce tension between police forces and the communities. Second, we do need to have more police officers who are members of the minority groups that are affected by policing. There are effective affirmative action programs in some police departments and not in others. That needs to be a priority. We also need to have training, much better training of police officers with respect to how to handle and respond to different situations. And that includes training about bias and subjective bias. And finally, there needs to be enforcement of the law when police officers violate the law.
Thank you. It sounds like you both feel, or you hinted that the federal government has a role over the states in this issue. Is that true or not, Mr. Ali?
Well, if they have reform, if the reform should come from Washington, D.C., because what is the law we have in the book is not in favor of minority. That's basically created in order to feed their friend who build multi-billion-dollar prison system and robbing at people, killing people. That's the way they're making money. So we have to reform justice reform in order to get out of it. And marijuana law is supposed to be, we should legalize marijuana nationwide, period. If we're going to help people with opioid problem, we should do the same thing for marijuana. No one should be killed for police officer unless it's justified and police an attack with weapon. But otherwise, in this country, we should not take life away. Life is precious. So many families have been destroyed with those law, mass incarceration, war and drug. It's failed. It doesn't work. That have to be fixed. If I go to Washington, D.C., I will try to make sure marijuana is legalized and to protect the minority from gun violence or from the police. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Payne.
With Donald Trump in the White House, I don't want to give the federal government any more power over anything. And Jeff Sessions going around after marijuana, thinking he's running the pot police, while the entire country is being undermined by the Russians And he doesn't even remember when he's met with the Russians when asked by a United States Senator, and that's perjury. So I'm not going to want more federal intervention in any of these areas until we get these people out of here, and that includes immigration enforcement. I would rather have the states take care of these decisions. Now, we have a responsible federal government. Yes, there's a role, and that goes back to what Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he was president, recognized that in civil rights, there is a role for the federal government to enforce federal court orders, Brown versus Board of Education and others, where the states will not. And we continue to have a problem where the state and local governments will not enforce civil rights laws, particularly with respect to African Americans and Native Americans and other affected groups. And the federal government does have a legitimate role in making sure that the Justice Department, for example, investigates police shootings and appropriate action is taken when federal civil rights are violated. But once again, we need to have people in charge of the executive branch who are responsible. And right now, we have a very dangerous group of people who are running Washington, D.C. And I don't want them having any more authority in the state of Minnesota. Anything I can avoid with Donald Trump's law enforcement people coming to this state, I wouldn't want them here.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
This is true, a dangerous man in charge of our government. That's the fact. There is gone, the election is gone, he's in charge. But we have to think beyond Donald Trump. This is the time to prepare ourselves for 2020. If we elect right people now and the right people in 2020, we can change the political landscape. That's the way to go. Again, we're going back to vote, organize, and vote for the right people. That's the only way we can change Washington, D.C. For the meantime, there's nothing we can do about it. Why? Because you don't have enough people who went out and vote. That can be fixed. Let's again come together and send the right people in Washington, D.C. But if you send me, if you give me the privilege, I will lead toward the change.
Mr. Boehner, did you want to respond?
I agree 100%. We need to think beyond Donald Trump. And we need to think about having a government that is responsive to all of the people, that will protect civil rights, that honors the values of our country. I will emphasize, however, that this is an extremely dangerous situation we have right now, where the President of the United States is threatening the freedom of the press, is talking about the press the way Hitler talked about the press in 1932. By 1933, there wasn't a free press, at least by the middle of 33. It can happen very quickly. This is a dangerous president. I will make it a priority to enforce the law, and that includes the Constitution of the United States. We need to have an immediate hearing, convene hearings of the House and Senate Judiciary Committee to investigate the President, the Vice President, and the Attorney General for the violations of the Constitution, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and other violations of the criminal statutes. It has to happen. This is a very, very grave threat to our country. So I will talk about 2020. We can do a lot in 2020, but I want to get to 2020, and I want to make sure we have an election in 2020. And this man is not talking like he wants to have an election in 2020, at least not a fair one.
I
think we have one more minute left. This is our last topic, so I do.
Can I add to this question or not?
Yes, you may.
Well, again, in order to do all those things we are talking about it, if we take the House and Senate back, again, we're going back to make sure we get out to vote.
Mr. Boehner?
Absolutely right. Vote. And vote for people who will do the right thing. Don't just look at the label, the D or the R. Look for someone who will stand up for civil rights, who will stand up against Donald Trump and call for impeachment of Donald Trump, someone who will not be in the back pocket of the sulfide bonding companies or the medical device companies or any of the other corporate powers, and someone who does not take PAC money. Send the right people to Washington, because we are sick and tired of the corruption. The American people are sick and tired of it.
All right, thank you both. I think we are now moving into questions from the audience. All right, you guys ready? They're a lot tougher.
Wonderful.
What would you ask Tina Smith or any of the other candidates? And I believe we are to Mr. Ali first. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. What would you ask Tina Smith or any of the other candidates if she were here tonight?
I will ask Tina Smith of her past involvement with corporation. Will she represent the people of Minnesota or the corporation? Because I heard she's supporting the mining with sulfur mining in northern region. That's the question I will ask. If she fully support and protect the environment, and why she went with the corporation.
Anybody else anything else you'd ask any of the other candidates, Mr. Ali, since you have a second left?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Painter.
I would ask Senator Smith why you're not here tonight, why my repeated requests for debates made over and over again in various forums are ignored, why we can't have a debate. I would ask Senator Smith whether a debate is the way that we, the people, can fight back against Citizens United and corporate body. How we, the people, when we have a debate and we film the debate, we put it up on the internet, we can watch it any time we want between now and the election. Or is it better for us to watch an advertisement of the candidate drinking coffee and eating donuts or whatever it is? And that's a nice ad. I'm telling you, it's a nice ad. It's going to get nasty in the fall, and it's going to get really ugly. We've got to be a society that turns off that TV, that shuts down those PAC-funded ads, that insists on debates, and then put those debates up on the internet. People watch them anytime. That's the great thing about technology. It's much better than when I was a kid, because back then you actually had to go to the debate or watch it on TV, and they may not even cover the debate. But now you can watch it anytime, anyone in the state of Minnesota. If Senator Smith were here tonight, we could have that debate. We could take back our democracy from the Supreme Court, from Citizens United, and she can do it by simply being here. So my question would be, why aren't you here?
Thank you. Okay, next question. And I think we start with you, Mr. Painter. What can we do to make four-year college affordable, and what's your idea of affordable college?
Well, most countries around the world charge minimal fees in college, and then the idea is when you graduate college, if you're successful financially, as usually you are, a college degree does help you earn more, you're going to pay taxes that then pay college for the next generation. I mean, college has to be paid for. So I'm not going to talk about free college. We're going to talk about college. The system that's used in most countries is to fund it through the tax base. And we used to do that with our public universities. We had fees that were at least modest for the tuition, and people could go, and then they would earn more money and then pay taxes that supported the public universities. But the tuition is skyrocketing. We have student loans that can't be paid back. Because instead of being expected to pay based on your earnings, you're just expected to pay a flat amount, regardless of how much you make. So we have a lot of non-performing student loans. This system's a mess. Now, we can't transition immediately to the system they have in just about every other part of the world. It's the same thing with healthcare. But we are going to have to forgive a lot of these student loans. We're going to have to move toward government subsidized, yes, government subsidized tuition, to reduce the tuition and increase the tax base to pay for it. So you take the subsidized tuition, you pay less for college, and yes, you get out there. If you make a lot of money, you're going to be in a higher bracket. And I don't think the public will reject the idea of raising taxes if you tell people what they're going to get for it. And high quality higher education should be a priority.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Again, the question is, what can we do to make four-year college affordable? And what is your definition of affordable, Mr. Ali?
If many countries around the world are able to do it, there is no reason why we can do it. Where are we going to get the money from? For me, there is no affordable supposed to be free. If we provide free education from K-12 I'm sure we can do 4 more years. We will be better off. In order to compete in the 21st century, we need to have a solid education and free education. We can reduce the money we spend left and right for military spending, billions of dollars, and we can tax Wall Street and the wealthiest. If we do that, we're going to be able to finance a free 4-year public education. Our students, that's have to go again, the big money. Why we prevent our children get good education? Because the 1% don't want to join them. If you are educated, if you have no loan, you're going to be able to become successful in your life. So they want to keep you low. That's why it's so expensive. You cannot get in. In order to catch up with the 1%, it has to be 100% free, and it's possible.
I agree, but I want to emphasize, I think we're going to have to raise taxes, at least in the upper part of the middle class. I mean, you're not going to get the education for free in the sense you pay for it later. But instead of paying for it for a loan with a loan that you may not be able to afford to pay back, which is what we have now, and so the person who borrows money to go to college because a Wall Street banker pays back the same student loan as the person who's a teacher, who is the person who is unemployed and can't get any job at all, and therefore can't pay, and it goes into default. Instead of that crazy system, what you do is you say, okay, the college education is free, but we will have higher income taxes. And I have to be, I'm going to be honest with you, I have to be. I don't think we can do it just by saying we're taxing the 1%. You know, it is going to go into at least the upper part of the middle class. There are going to be tax hikes for people like me at least. There will be. But we'll get something for it. Because right now, I got to worry about how am I going to send 3 kids to college without massive debt. Whereas if we had a sensible system where we had government subsidized universities, as we used to have in this country, this is the area where we've gone backwards, where a lot of people will say we should be living back where we were in the 1950s when it comes to affordability of a state university. It's much, much worse. You know, if we could relieve families of that burden, many, many middle-class families would gladly pay 4 or 5% more in income tax or whatever it takes. And we can do it. And that's how countries around the world have solved this.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Mr. Ali.
As a country, if are we able to give a tax break during Bush and now Donald Trump, trillions of dollars, I think we can afford to do the same things for our kids. Of course, this is collective responsibility. Who is paying all those federal budget now? It's us. It's taxes. And go in furthermore and pay a little bit more if you're going to have a better tune. That is the way to go. That's going to benefit all of us. And I want United States of America to keep the edge we have when it comes to technology, advanced technology. We don't have to give visa for foreigner in order to come to work here, and we have the capacity and the possibility to educate our own. That's going to resolve our immigration issue already. But at the meantime, and I believe Americans are ready to make an effort to pay a little bit more if their kids can go to college. I have 6 children. There is no way I'm going to be able to pay for them. I'm not the only one in this situation. As that's the way to go, and it's possible. We can do it.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. And I told you that they were tougher. So, Mr. Ali, we'll start with you. What specific ways, we all know you're supportive of it, but we want to know what specific ways you plan to help unions.
In union, protecting collective bargaining. Again, let's go back to elect the people who will vote and protect the union. How to do with organizing? How to do with voting? Think about it. This is Wisconsin, right to work, pass. The only specific thing that we do is to educate Minnesota. Minnesota, by the way, is very strong union state. We have to continue to organizing and passing a law, federal law, to allow union to organize without fear, without losing their job. That's the way to go. And I know it's possible. It's a very good paying job. Union losing ground with those old new law. But if we come together, we elected the right people, people who will pass a law, who favor the union, I know we can overcome those challenges. That's the way to go. That's what I'm planning to do.
Mr. Painter.
I strongly agree. These so-called right-to-work laws, they always come up with a good slogan to try and sell something. And that's why I always ask, what are we talking about, right to work? What it is a law that says that the company can't agree with the union to only have union workers. That's an interference with the freedom of contract of the company and the union in negotiating a collective bargaining agreement if they can't have a closed shop. If you can't have a closed shop, what ends up happening is you get other workers coming in who don't belong to the union, who are freeloading off what the union did to get higher wages, don't belong to the union, and then won't go out on strike if they have to go out on strike. That completely destroys the collective bargaining power of the union. So, to call something right to work, they come up with a fancy slogan like that. It's right to work in a non-union environment because no union wants to organize. It's extremely hard under those laws. Yes, they should all be preempted by federal law for all 50 states. That is just simply, that we are going to allow and encourage union-only shops when the workforce unionizes, and that's in the collective bargaining agreement. And it's critically important that we do this because unions can help solve a lot of problems with respect to employer-employee relationships at the company level, rather than having to use government regulation, which we often have to think of doing if we don't have enough union power in the workforce to address problems at that level.
Okay, Mr. Painter, you get the next one. Next topic. Affordable housing is a major issue in Minnesota. How do you plan to address this issue?
Differently than we do now. We now have these housing urban development projects. They're subsidized by the federal government and the state, and the real estate developers get in the act, and they make major campaign contributions, grease the skids with all the politicians, and skim a bunch off the top. These projects are highly segregated in Minnesota, lots of other problems. Detailed research that has been done is by my colleague at the University of Minnesota Law School, Myron Orfeld. It's posted on the website. We shouldn't do it that way. We should have direct subsidies for people who cannot afford housing, their rent, to basically to pay to the landlord a certain percentage or whatever it is you need to top it off so you can afford housing wherever you want. And then people can go get housing wherever they want, and make it illegal for a landlord to discriminate against someone based on the source of the payment. So it'd be illegal to discriminate against someone because they're receiving a subsidy. But I think we'd be much better off with direct subsidies to those in need, so they can choose their own housing where they want, rather than these projects where all these investors are skimming off the top. By the way, Sean Hannity is investing in the HUD housing, and I can assure you he has no interest in helping the people who are living in those units.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. Mr. Ali.
I think to begin with, when we call affordable, why the question itself, affordable housing? Doesn't mean people don't make enough money, right? What we should do is raise the minimum wage. They should earn an income that are able to pay a rent. Even with $15 minimum wage, it's impossible to pay. We must stop gentrification. The luxury apartments are built in every corner of our cities through the United States. Why is behind that? Is to push the poor people out of town. We must stop. We need to have a direct subsidy for those poor people able to pay their rent. But having said that, we also have to raise their minimum wage. If those people got good income, they're gonna be able. Let's have to go back again to education. Let's have to go back again to healthcare. That's all, you have to go together in order to improve. If they don't have to worry about healthcare, if they don't worry about the education of their children, and then making good money, and they can have better life. That's how to do again with electing the right people who will care for the poor. People who understand, people for themselves going through the same problem, worry about paying their rent, buying their food, buying their medication. That is missing. Compassion. People who care. I do care about poor. I do care about families struggling to buy their grocery, because I am one of them. I was struggling paying my bill, and still struggling paying my bill.
I would agree. I want to just emphasize with respect to minimum wage. I strongly support raising the minimum wage, and the $15 number makes sense to me. Certainly, I think you really need 17 or 20 to be able to live, in our current economy. What we need to do with the minimum wage, though, is we can impose a higher minimum wage across the United States. If there are parts of the country where we determine that the higher minimum wage will lead to people losing jobs or a drop in employment, mostly rural areas. If that were to be the case, we could have counties or various local governments apply for an exception, but not be an exception where people would get less money, but where the government, the federal government, would provide a subsidy to top it off. So if the $17 an hour weren't sustainable in a particular area, and people weren't able to get jobs, you say, okay, you can pay $14, $15, but then we will have a government subsidy where the worker is going to get that extra money. I just want to make it absolutely sure that when we raise the minimum wage, the money is getting to workers, every worker gets that money, but that we don't have a situation where in some parts of the country we have a decrease in employment. People end up on the welfare rolls who could have had a job at 15 or 14, but we can deal with that with a subsidy. I'd much rather pay out the subsidy in those situations we absolutely have to than have someone not employed at all. But there are ways to do it. Every single person should bring home at least 15 an hour, and they really should be bringing home more.
Mr. Ali, this jumps into the next question. I'm going to skip ahead to a question because you're both starting to address it. What is I hear from you, Mr. Painter, at least 15 on that minimum wage?
Yes, and I just want to emphasize, I think most all places, I think the employer can carry the entire burden of the 15 plus, of course, the applicable taxes. But there are going to be some situations where I think we may need the government, we need some help to step in to make absolutely sure that we don't raise the unemployment rate. And also in difficult times, too, there might be a situation where we would need additional government subsidy.
Okay, let me forge ahead here with this question. So what time frame are you talking about, and how will you keep the minimum wage from falling behind again? And I'm going to go ahead and go on with you, Mr. Painter, and then Mr. Ali, you can answer the whole question.
Index it for inflation. That will solve the problem of falling behind. And I would do that right away. I think we can do that right away. You certainly get to 15 right away, and I think we can maybe go higher. Once again, if we are prepared to deal with the situations where there may have to be government subsidy to avoid unemployment, or if the economy takes a downturn, we just need to be prepared to deal with that.
Time frame. Time frame.
Now.
Thank you. Mr. Ali.
Well, with a friend of mine, we was trying to play a little bit with $15 an hour. We came up with $1,200 something. You take $900 for rent, you're done. No matter how much you make, no matter how many jobs you have, you end up in subsidies. You end up in welfare. Well, from the beginning of we invest enough money in earlyhood child education and K-12 in university, we're not going to have this problem. That can be solved. Education is the key. Education is the solution. But I want to go right now. We don't have to wait in order to improve the life of people. Those people suffer so much. As an elected official, we have to find the solution to improve the life of our constituents. That's the role. If you elect someone, is to improve your life and to defend you. If you give me a chance, that's what I'm planning to do, and I know it is possible. Of course, it's up and down in the economy. It's happened. But American, we are able to we come so many challenges, and I think we can overcome these challenges too. We need to be prepared, and again, together, we can find solution. This is a great country, where everything is possible, and we can do it.
Thank you both. Mr. Painter, this one specifically for you. You knew this one was coming. So please explain how what appears to be, I'm sorry, this is not written well. Please explain how what appears to be your progressive values align with your service on a conservative foundation board, and how do the values of a conservative foundation align with your own?
I'm not on the board. I believe you're referring to the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation. I'm on the audit committee and the investment committee, which handle audit. That's the books and records and working with auditors to make sure they're in compliance with the requirements for auditors. That has nothing to do with where the foundation gives its money. The investment committee works with the brokerage firms that are investing the money, the assets of the foundation. Once again, that has nothing to do with the grants made by the foundation. I don't get a role in grant-making decision. It's not my family's foundation. It's people I know who, I have clients. I'm a law professor. I also do expert witnessing, securities cases. I provide services on, I'm an expert on the audit process. I worked on the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. So I do have clients. I'm going to, of course, get rid of all of this when I go into the United States Senate. But I don't think it makes sense to say I will only provide legal services or only do audit committee work for people who agree with me politically. This particular foundation gives probably about 70–80% of its money to things like McAllister. They give money to McAllister, Harvard University, Princeton, programs for inner city education for inner city children and so forth. A percentage is going to conservative causes that I don't agree with. But say once again, a lawyer, an accountant, an investment advisor, if it's unreasonable, say, well, I will only render services to people who are, I agree with politically. But when I go in the United States Senate, all of, I'm not doing private sector work. All of that's going to be finished, done.
Thank you. Mr. Ali, I'll address the next question to you first. When I was a young man, I protested in an immoral war in Vietnam. What would you suggest a young man do today to protest immoral, illegal, and unconstitutional wars?
Well, we can protest. It's a great thing to do, express our constitutional right. But at the meantime, what is lacking in our youth today is political participation. And I know most of the youth today are progressive, are Democrat. They're more liberal. They need to be organized and fully participate in political process, to vote, to run for office, in order to change the political landscape.
Thank you, Mr. Painter.
War has been the cause of a great deal of destruction, not only of human life, but of families' lives, of the economy, the economic dislocation of many, many millions of people. We need to address the problem of war. And now with nuclear weapons, war could very well destroy the human race. And we have a man who is mentally unstable, who's in control of nuclear weapons in the United States right now. We need to address the problem of war if we want our human race to survive on this planet. And it starts with our young people caring about their own future and their children's future. It starts with those of us who are older also recognizing that we have a responsibility to do better, because we make the same mistake over and over again. And we don't necessarily teach our students as much in the schools as we should about history, and how often we've made this mistake of getting into wars, thinking we're going to make things better, and it just doesn't turn out that way. If we don't solve this problem, given the weaponry we have now, we won't be on this planet anymore. It's a #1 priority. So I just hope that the younger generation particularly is just going to put the heat on us when it comes to military spending and warfare. It's got to stop.
Right, Bago.
Yes, you do.
Like we all know, and we still are at the brink of a nuclear war. That can happen anytime, either from North Korea or from our president. I think it's too big and too much responsibility to give to one person who can decide if he can push the button or not. Furthermore, I am for free world of nuclear weapon. We must eliminate those weapons before they eliminate us. And it's possible. Even it doesn't have to be war, it can be accident. And we're all gone. The only solution is get rid of them now, before it's too late. I'm encouraging our youth to organize and to fight to end nuclear weapon once for all.
To be specific about the president's authority to launch any type of war, we need to revisit the War Powers Act and redraft, because there is a fundamental misunderstanding when we have presidents who believe they can commence hostile actions overseas that are very likely to lead to retaliation by another country and get us into war. We cannot have the president unilaterally deciding to go and intervene in another country. We cannot have the president unilaterally decide to do anything other than defend our country in a crisis where we're being attacked. The president must be required to go to Congress, and to go to Congress with accurate information, not what happened with the Iraq invasion, with accurate information. And we cannot have what we had with President Clinton went into Kosovo without going to Congress. You've got to go to Congress. And whether it's right or it's wrong, Congress needs to have a voice in this. We cannot have a president have the unilateral power to commence bombing operations anywhere. I don't care what the justification is. You've got an argument to commence bombing operations somewhere. You're the president, you come to Congress, and that needs to be the law. And it's not, because we got presidents after presidents commencing bombing operations all over the world without any authorization from Congress.
I want to add to this.
Okay.
Another problem we have is partisan politics. It doesn't matter who's in power, Republican and Democrat. We need to have independent-minded senator who can stand up against his own party. If he's not, doesn't represent the vital interests of this country, if gonna put us, our men and women, in harm's way, I will veto it. I will not support a war who will harm our men and women, unnecessary war. On the other hand, most of people we send into Washington, D.C. have no clue about foreign policy. They don't get it. Why? The foreigners don't vote. Therefore, they've been tough in a war. They're strong. America is... No, that's not the way to go. What are those Republican insurgencies who care about babies or abortion? Killing people left and right around the world is a crime. We're taking lives away. Unless we've been attacked, unless our vital interests been jeopardized, there is no way I will support to send you daughters and sons to the war. I can guarantee you that. But again, it's about time to elect people who understand the concept of war, who understand the foreign policy, the impact to have our economy and our men and women. Our military is still suffering from PTSD. There are parents who take 24/7 take care of wounded veteran as we speak. That's the only one who know what the meaning of consequences. It's about time to stand up. I will do exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Mr. Painter, last one on this topic.
Once again, this is an extremely dangerous situation we have right now with this president in particular. The 25th Amendment of the United States Constitution does provide a process for removal of a president who is physically or mentally unfit. Unfortunately, requires the cabinet to start the process, and this president has surrounded himself with cabinet officials who will do anything to ingratiate themselves with this president. But it is extremely dangerous when you have a president with his mental stability or instability who's in control of nuclear weapons. We need to address this situation, and because he has committed impeachable offenses, that process needs to start now. And then we need to think about whether any other president should ever have the power to commence any hostilities anywhere in the world without the consent of Congress. The answer is no. And then we need to move toward negotiation of denuclearization, elimination of nuclear weapons in the United States and elsewhere. Real negotiations with real treaties, with enforcement, with verification. Not some deal where the president goes over to North Korea and 1 minute they're threatening to blow each other up, the next minute they're high-fiving like they're the best buddies, tweeting, you know, how are you, Mr. Chairman, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to play that game anymore. We got nukes here. And if he wants to play in the sandbox with any other world dictator, he can go to the corner sandbox down at the park. But, you know, this is extremely dangerous where we are right now.
Okay, Mr. Painter, I think we are at the end of all of our questions. Thank you, audience. No, I think we've responded quite a bit on this one, so we're going to wrap this one up. And Mr. Painter, if you would like to give your closing remarks, and then Mr. Ali.
Can I make, I want to ask one thing to Mr. Painter, if you can. I think we have a wonderful evening, a good civic debate. It's not part of my nature to attack my opponent and go into the weed. And I know Mr. Painter been attacked left and right by Tina Smith and DFL leadership. I'm not part of that. At the meantime, I want Mr. Painter to clarify his involvement with Bush administration while he served as ethics lawyer, that Bush is considered for motive as war criminal because of waterboarding. Thank you.
Yes, I was the ethics lawyer. I worked on financial conflicts of interest for people coming into the Bush White House, also people appointed by the president to Senate-confirmed positions throughout the executive branch. There were several hundred of those a year. And then the president's nominees, the two nominees to the United States Supreme Court. They weren't interested in my views on policy. You might call it liberal, Republican, or whatever, but certainly not in sync with the views of the administration on many things. But I believe I did a very good job as an ethics lawyer in avoiding financial conflicts of interest, which are critically important. And it's important that people serve in the government, even when the government is doing things that are wrong. During Vietnam, we had many great Americans serve in the Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon administration as they conducted what really was an illegal war in Vietnam and used very, very, very controversial methods in that war. We've had this problem, and we had it with Bush Cheney. But, you know, you have to be able to go and serve. And I am proud I served. I disagree with many things. I wrote about the torture memos in my 2009 book, Getting the Government America Deserves, Oxford University Press. I teach those memos every year to my students about how Justice Department lawyers use their authority to justify torture, one of the many things that should never have happened. But Americans should be able to serve and be proud of serving and not pick and choose. I am glad I served, but I understand what was wrong, and I hope we can never make those mistakes again.
Mr. Ali, thank you for that excellent question. I'll allow you a response, and then I'm going to allow Mr. Painter to ask you a question if he has one.
I want to thank Mr. Painter for your service, and also it's better late than never to leave the Republican Party and join Democratic Party. I really thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Mr. Painter, do you have a question for Mr. Ali?
Mr. Ali, what should we do about this man in the White House, and what will you do as the senator about him and the vice president and the rest of them?
And I think until we have the majority, is little we can do, but we can ask the help, you know, Putin to take him to Russia. We'll be very happy.
I'll buy the ticket.
Thank you both. Thank you both for agreeing to participate in this debate, and particularly since, given the interest that this region has in the future seat. So thank you both so much. I would like you to give a closing speech or closing talk. Mr. Franken, start with you.
Thank you very much for coming here tonight, and I hope that many of my fellow Minnesotans will watch this debate. I believe strongly the debates will, if we formalize this process and expect debates and expect candidates to show up or at least provide the chair, that the public will begin to change the approach that we've had to elections, where we turn on the TV and listen to the ads, the attack ads, and the rest of it. Because when we do that, we're letting other people choose our government. And Russia will not be the first. We will allow multinational corporations to choose our government, the Koch brothers, the Mercer family, some other foreign power. And we will solve this problem when we take back our democracy by reversing the Citizens United case, by constitutional amendment if necessary, bring in small dollar donors, banning PACs and super PACs, and insisting that there be debates for each primary and each general election. Set aside a night, a year in advance. This is debate night. No excuses. You don't show up, we'll provide the chair. But we're going to take that, we're going to put it up on the internet, and everyone's going to be able to watch it. And we're going to encourage every American, and run public service ads if we need to tell every American, when that ad comes on your television, funded by some PAC, some super PAC, by Polymet, or whoever it is, that's the time to put the thing on mute and go and get a beer.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Punter for civic debate. I want to thank the chairwoman. I want to thank each one of you who make an effort and take a time to participate in this debate. I want to thank my daughter, Medina Ali Chehem, my daughter, Aysar Ali Chehem, who's in this room, my friend Jim. I want to thank my wife, Sabira Yusuf, for her support. These years, my brothers and sisters, it's not about the left. It's not about the right. It is a philosophy. This is ideas and values. This is a time for change. From refugee camp to U.S. Senate, here I am, 1,000 miles away, debating a lawyer, graduate from one of the best universities, Ivy League. This is an honor for me. If you give me the chance, the privilege to be your senator, Minnesota will shine. We're going to move forward this country. I will be an asset for Minnesota and for United States of America. I mean what I say what I mean. Everything we debate, all policies, I'm going to fight for it. I will not be by corporation. I will make sure to take the money, big money, out of politics. I'm also challenging our government. Regardless of the outcome of this election, I am ready to serve and help for American vital interests around the world beyond Minnesota. Minnesota is up to you to make a difference. To send the first African immigrant to your Senate. Let's make history together. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great.
It was an honor.
Great honor.
I wish you had it.
Thank you all for joining us today, and I don't know about the rest of you, but this has been one of the nicest debates I've ever seen, so thank you all. Very civil. And I have to say, I'm so happy that between the two of you have 9 children. Those you two will lead us. So, thank you all.
Well, thank you so much. Thank
You could have done without me here.
you. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Because we don't have Polish difference.
You have to be here.